Today's virtual appointment subject will be about atypical and dysplastic nevi. We hope you find this tutorial helpful. So let's get started. Here in the first slide, you see an atypical nevus. Well, atypical refers to the clinical appearance of the mole. So if the mole is not symmetric, if it has more than one color in the mole, then it's referred to as an atypical nevus. A dysplastic nevus is actually a histologic term. So atypical nevi, they're moles that are unusual or funny looking. They break our ABCDE rules. They may be sporadic, so you can have one atypical nevus. Sometimes they run in the family. And that's called familial atypical mole and melanoma syndrome. Atypical nevi and dysplastic nevi are sometimes used interchangeably, but technically dysplastic nevus only refers to a mole that's also unusual histologically when it's looked at under the microscope. So what are the ABCDEs of melanoma? Here you see A is for asymmetry. One half of the mole does not match the other half. B is for borders, so the border should be oval or round, with mole should be oval or round with smooth edges, smooth borders, not fading edges or scalloped or jagged borders. C is color, more than one color in the mole. We'd like to see it. D is diameter, bigger than the size of a pencil eraser. And E is evolution. Is the mole evolving, growing, changing, itching, burning, stinging, anything like that? We'd want to see it. It just has to break one rule for us to want you to bring this mole to the attention of your dermatologist. Next, we're going to take a look at atypical nevi, moles, and melanoma. Here on the left side of the slide, you see a normal, typical appearing nevus, oval, uniform in color. Now, in the middle, you see an atypical nevus. It's larger than 6 millimeters. There's color variation. And in the far right, you see an example of a melanoma. We can see that sometimes it's difficult to tell if it's an atypical nevus or a melanoma. And sometimes this can only be told by biopsy. Dysplastic nevi, again, these clinically, to the naked eye, they appear unusual. They break the rules of the ABCDEs of melanoma. But dysplasia refers to the histologic appearance. And sometimes we give it a grade. What that means is the dermatopathologist, the physician that looks at moles under the microscope, will give a degree of dysplasia grade for these moles. And these moles are a risk factor for melanoma. So let's take a look at how I like to explain the grading system. So on the far left, you see benign. So it's a normal mole, but it's somewhat of a spectrum. So between normal and melanoma, what are these moles? Well, these are dysplastic nevi. The first step along this spectrum is mild dysplasia. Next is moderate, and following that is severe dysplasia. And that's all a histologically determined criteria. For moderate and severe dysplasia, those are often excised, whereas mild dysplasia can be monitored, and we like to let those patients know that they are at slightly increased risk for melanoma somewhere else on their, potentially somewhere else on their body. Again, here's a typical junctional nevus. This is a benign appearing mole, oval and round. Oval to round, uniform in color. And here's a dysplastic nevus again with different colors and a notched border. Another example of a banal appearing mole. And here's an atypical nevus. Clinically, it's got more than one color. It's relatively small, but it's an unusual shape. And here's an example of another melanoma skin cancer. So we want to know, how full is your sun cup? So when we're born, this is the story I like to tell patients. When we're born, if we have fair skin, blue eyes, well, our sun cup is relatively small. Over time, sun exposure accumulates in that sun cup, whether it be sunlight or tanning bed use. Once your sun cup is full, then you're at much greater risk for skin cancer, and the sun damage also causes wrinkling and sunspots to the skin. So you want to protect your sun cup from further damage by use of sunscreen.